Shalom and welcome to the One Pasuk podcast, where the rabbis at Congregation Avas Torah each share an insight on one particular pasuk from the parsha and reflect on each other's ideas. Rabbinic banter, I like to call it. I am Chaim Pupko, and I am joined by my dear friends and teammates, Rabbi Daniel Goldberg,
Shalom,
and Rabbi Morty Kisus.
Shalom.
Our one pasuk for this week, Parshas Mishpatim, comes from towards the end of the parsha, Perek Chavdaled Pasuk Zayin, chapter 24, verse 7. Parshas Mishpatim begins, of course, with many different mitzvos, but what it represents is the conclusion of the revelation at Sinai, Ma'amed Har Sinai, and so the end of the parsha contains a description of the end of that event. And in the course of that description of everything that went on when Moshe brings the Torah down from Har Sinai, the pasuk here says, "Vayikach Sefer Habris." Then he, Moshe, took the record of the covenant, the book of the covenant, Vayikra ba'aznei ha'am, and he read it aloud to the people. Vayomru, and they responded, Kol asher diber Hashem na'aseh v'nishma. They said all together in unison, everything that Hashem has spoken, we will do and we will listen. That famous assertion, acceptance of the yoke of heaven. Many people, I think, assume that Na'aseh v'nishma was said in Parshas Yisro. It's not. It's here at the end of Parshas Mishpatim. And, all right, what do we got?
So firstly, I think it's amazing, it never dawned on me, that this pasuk, which is so foundational to our covenant with Hashem, is actually found in chapter 24, verse 7, 24/7. Now, of course, the chapters and the psukim are...
Be honest, did ChatGPT tell you that?
ChatGPT did not tell me that.
Okay.
The Perek and Pasuk are actually based on non-Jewish sources.
Right.
We have our own, the Bali Masorah have a different way of numbering the Torah. So it's a Christian system, actually. But we do say in the Gemara, Hakol talui b'mazel afilu shever Torah shebeheichal, right? Everything has a certain mazel. And I do think, if nothing else, it is a great mnemonic if you want to remember. Na'aseh v'nishma, this is a really important pasuk, 24/7. Shmos 24/7, because we have to honor this all the days of our life. So anyway, that's not my comment here. But
it does give me the opportunity to inform our listenership that we are now on the 24/6 app. Not 24/7, 24/6 is an app in which one can find all sorts of Jewish and Torah content.
My assumption is the overwhelming majority of Englewood is subscribed to that and not like Spotify or Apple Podcasts, right?
Of course.
Yeah, I think the rabbi's speaking to our non-Englewood residents now for the 24/6 pitch.
Although they are not the original ones to use that line 24/6. Because long ago, there was a great cartoon in the New Yorker of an obviously Jewish-looking guy standing, talking on his cell phone, and the caption was, "I am here for you 24/6."
I love that. That's great.
There's a classic Gemara on Masechet Shabbat, and the Gemara speaks of a time where the great Amorah Rava was sitting and studying Torah. He was so deeply immersed in the subject matter and so all consumed by his studying, that he did not notice that he was sitting on his thumbs and they began to bleed from the exertion of the study of Torah. And at that moment, one of the Siddukim, one of the Sadducees, passes by, and he sees Rava, and he says, "This nation has not learned much because you were impetuous back then, and you're still an impulsive, impetuous people today." And he was referencing Dekadmitu Pumaichu Leudnaichu. You preceded, your mouths preceded your ears. Before you even heard what it was that God wanted to instruct, you already said, "I'll do." How could you say "I'll do" if you don't even know what it is that Hashem is asking us to do? Now, Rava responded with a mashal. He said, "Let me explain to you something. Imagine, we'll modernize the mashal for a moment. Imagine there's a family office that does real estate, and the grandfather and the father and the son, the grandson, they're all in the business together. And one day, the father runs into the office. He looks at his son and he says, "Listen, we have to sign this contract immediately. This has to be out before 12 noon. And it's a huge opportunity. It's a serious deal. A lot hinges on this. And the father throws the contract down in front of the son, and the son obviously blindly signs the contract. It's his dad. It's his business partner for many years. It's somebody he implicitly trusts. But if we change the scenario and we said, let's say some random guy comes running into their real estate office and he says, this is the opportunity of a lifetime, but you have to sign this contract. You don't even have time to review it. Just sign it. Would we sign it? Of course not, because we don't trust that person and we don't know anything about them. And so Rava turns to the Siduki and he says, you guys don't have that loving relationship that we have with Hashem. We view God as our loving Father. He would never put anything before us that could potentially harm us. And therefore, the moment he put a contract down before us, we told ourselves, of course we're in. What's the question? It has to be that this is ultimately going to be extremely good for us. Not good, but extremely good. And so Am Yisrael was impetuous in terms of signing it without actually reading it. But ultimately, they knew, who's placing that before me? That contract is coming from my loving Father. There's no question in my mind. And we too, the lesson is obvious. We have to understand that when Hashem asks us to do something, it's coming from a place in which he so deeply wants that connection. And there is no doubt in our minds that it's going to be good for us. And even when sometimes we're not sure and we're uncertain, but we as Jews have always been people that said, Na'aseh, we will do. Prior to Nishma, we will listen.
That's a beautiful idea that I've thought about in the context of chukim. It's not just that we blindly follow mitzvos that we don't understand. No, when you observe a chok, you're basically saying, I trust you, Hashem. And it's like when a child responds to when a parent says, well, why do you have to do this? Because I said so. Because I said so. And when the child trusts their parent, they do it because they said so. And so to adhere to the chukim, there's actually something emotional about it, that we place this trust in Hashem. And that's exactly what Rabbi Kisus, you're bringing out from Na'aseh v'nishma.
And I think it actually it's pretty much precisely what I wanted to bring out from a Sforno, who gives a very elegant reading of this pasuk. It's slightly different than the way we typically read it, but I think we end up in more or less the same place, which is Na'aseh v'nishma is not chronological, that we will do and then we'll listen, then we'll learn, and then we'll read the fine print. What the Sforno says is Na'aseh l'tachlis shenishma b'kolo, that we will do it for the very purpose of listening. Meaning, we'll follow all the laws, not because of some reward and not because of some external benefit that we'll receive. We're doing it because I said so, as you said, Rabbi Pupko. We'll do it because just simply to be listening to your voice, just simply to be following what you're telling us to do for no alternative or external purpose. And he references the idea of al tiyu ka'avadim hamishamshim esarav al menasa kal pras, that you should not be like a servant. This is in Mishnah Avos, who serves his master on the condition of receiving reward. I'll just take us on a little bit of an aside. So the conclusion of the Mishnah is rather you should be like an Eved that's Mishamshin Esarav Shalo al Minas L'Kabel Pras, right? Not on the condition of receiving reward. The Mishnah doesn't really have to say that second part. If you say don't serve your master for reward. So the Rambam has a different girsa, which is amazing. The Rambam's girsa is rather you should be Ka'avadim HaMishamshin Esarav al Minas Shalo L'Kabel Pras. You should be like a servant who serves his master on the condition not to receive a reward, which is an incredible. You think about it, you're like, wow, that's pretty much unattainable for me, right? That I should be serving Hashem on the condition that I not get reward. But I heard the following mashal, very simple, from Rav Meir Tversky in YU, and it suddenly, this incredibly lofty ideal becomes so tangible and so real. You could imagine if Dina and I went out for dinner one night and my parents watched my children, they babysat. And when I came home, if I took out $40 and I handed it to my mother and I said, thank you so much for watching my children, she'd look at me like I had 4 eyes. She'd look at me like I grew up. It's an insult. It's an insult, right? It's insulting. I didn't do this for money. In fact, it's insulting that you would give me money, right? Because when you have that level of closeness and love, it's not about the reward. And that's, according to the Rambam's Girsa, that's what this Mishnah is saying. And that's why it's necessary to say that second version, don't do it for reward, do it dafka not for reward, because you have that level of closeness to Hashem.
It reminds me of that story they tell about the Gra, how there was no kosher esrog in Vilna at one time, which happened in Europe. And a visitor came, like during Chol Moed, and had an esrog, and they brought him to the Gra, and the Gra said, can I acquire your esrog so I can use it? He says, I'll give it to you as long as I get the schar for the mitzvah, for your mitzvah, you, Gra, Mr. Rabbi Gra. And I imagine the people listening would have been shocked at, like, what kind of chutzpah, take away the schar from the Gra. But the Gra was so happy. He was so excited. He said, this is the best way to perform a mitzvah because I'm giving away my schar. I get no schar for doing this mitzvah. This is the most altruistic form or way of doing a mitzvah, which is exactly like you're saying. It's interesting. What I wanted to say about Nasev and Nishma, I think, Goldberg, your idea was similar in part to Rabbi Kesus's and took it in a bit of a different direction. And my idea is also different, but also I think similar in some ways. And that is, Pashut Pshat, we read Nasev and Nishma, we will do and we will listen as a progression that Bnei Yisrael are accepting upon themselves the yoke of heaven. They're going to do the mitzvos before even understanding or hearing their explanations. But I think we could also read it in a different way, and that is, by way of Naaseh, we will achieve Nishma. That we trust that once we begin adhering to the mitzvos, we will begin to really appreciate and understand them on a level that you just can't get just by hearing about it or reading about it. We always talk about, like, the Shabbos experience, right? You look at all the myriad laws, and Shabbos looks like some draconian practice. But for people who have observed Shabbos over many, many weekends, there's an appreciation for the aura, the mystique, the enjoyment of just being with family and being cut off from the world. And the same applies to many other aspects of mitzvos. And I firmly believe there are certain parts of Jewish life that you can't explain to someone, that can't be put into words, and they have to be experienced. And I think it's captured by this phrase, Na'aseh and Nishma.
It brings to mind an interview I once heard of a Hasidish boy who went off the derech and was no longer affiliated with the Jewish community at all, actually. And the interviewer asked him, is there anything you miss about the Hasidic community? And he said, if I can only explain to you what it's like singing Friday night with thousands of people as your Rebbe leads the Tish, and you were able to see, like, the nostalgia and the loss. And he's trying to convey this idea to somebody who's entirely indifferent to it. And she's like, it sounds so beautiful. He's like, I'm not doing it justice. It was a sublime experience. And he's feeling frustrated that he cannot convey the majesty and the grandeur of such a moment. But like you said, Rabbi, it's impossible. If you don't experience certain mitzvot, you'll never really be able to get that sensation of what a mitzvah can do to you.
Yeah.
One of my kids this week was trying to articulate a certain feeling, like, and he said, I can't, he's shy. He's 8. He said, I can't say it in human. and there's certain things that we just can't say in human. You have to say it in experience, in lived experience. Yeah. I love that reading. I think that's a brilliant reading, Rabbi. Na'aseh and Nishma, we trust that we'll do it, and then we'll have a much deeper understanding upon doing it and experiencing it. Beautiful.
Exactly. All right. Good Shabbos, everyone.